Alright guys, moving on here to part 3 of the videos. And you see on this one, I have my meshes cleaned up. Not all of them, but just the head shape, I guess. And on this one, we're going to start refining a little bit more and start creating some more interesting shapes. And you can see here, I'm just adding a primitive to the scene, and I'm just going to start creating some details or trying to manipulate some shapes just to experiment. And you see here I'm doing this on a separate subtool because I'm not sure exactly what I was doing, and I didn't want to mess up with the geometry that much. And then if I like this shape, it would be easy for me to duplicate around or replicate. And this is something I guess I changed from when I started making models years ago to this point. I used to be a lot more, I guess, 3ds Max or Maya heavy, and I guess through the years and through as ZBrush started introducing more ways of manipulating tools, I guess I use it less and less now for the high res. I still use a lot for just tools, or when you're working in like God of War, for example, at the studio, we have a lot of our tools are Maya based, so we still spend a lot of time in Maya. But for building up the high res, I guess it's not. I try to do as much as I can on ZBrush, and sometimes it gets hard to create specific shapes. I guess I'm not the best guy making high poly or inorganic, sci-fi stuff in ZBrush. When I used to work at BioWare in Mass Effect, I used to do a lot of my stuff in Max, or pretty much all my stuff in Max. To be honest, I used to do just a sketch in ZBrush for for the armors, and then import that to Max and start using as a guide to extract topology out of it, or retopo it in a way, and then finishing it up in Max. When I do more sci-fi stuff, I still do that. Like all my, even though ZBrush has a lot of really nice tools to do inorganic stuff inside of the software, I still, for me, it's much faster, and I know what I'm doing if I go on a different software. So that's why you probably not, unless I spend a lot of time trying to learn how to do that kind of stuff in ZBrush, you're probably never gonna see a tutorial from me of doing sci-fi stuff in ZBrush. I do like it a lot for sketching it out and playing with shapes, and I have plenty of stuff on my website too that shows more of the sketching process in ZBrush. So even here, like all the details for me or accessories, I try to do it in ZBrush. Like armor stuff, for me it's easy, the way of sketching something and then using ZRemesher, or trying to get a clean topology out of ZRemesher, or even doing using the retopology tools in ZBrush. I did use that a lot. I don't use it that much right now, but when it came out, I did a bunch of stuff with that, extracting a clean topology. I think ZRemesher gives you enough so you don't have to spend time retopologing stuff, but getting a clean topology out of a sketch and then using like high polish tools or clip and cut tools in ZBrush to get a sharper edge. So I do a lot of stuff with armors or even accessories that have a lot of pieces in it. I try to do it in ZBrush. So unless it's something that needs control, if I'm doing a toy or that needs certain type of articulation, I tend to do that in a different software just to have more control over measurements and that kind of stuff. ZBrush is still lacks on some of those tools. With the addition of the new tools in the new ZBrush, there's some a little bit more control over that, with the new axis, moving multiple subtools, like that stuff really helps. Anyway, so you see me here just playing around with the shapes and trying to add a little more ornaments to the piece, and I wasn't really sure of where I was going there. I was just trying some stuff, and that's the important part of not spending too much time when you're trying to design something. Being able to sketch it, Dynamesh, you can see there, I don't worry too much about like where I am at this point, or what kind of topology I have, and just being comfortable with that and just playing around. You see, I'll probably get rid of all this because I didn't really like where this was going. Later, I brought it back, and I can't stress enough about just keeping multiple revisions of your work, and this is a good example of some stuff that I did, and then I'll bring it back later. And you see me pulling stuff around to create shapes, just pretty much using move. I use the snake hook brush sometimes if I want to get something like this that has a little more curve, or I need to stress the topology a little bit more. The snake hook is very helpful for that kind of stuff. I've been using a lot of just clay to get some of those shapes back in place. It's very important to also just spend your time on just the primary shapes on this, or getting some sense of shape or detail, but not spending too much time trying to make it perfect, because you're gonna change your mind, or just at this point it's just trying to get how things are feeling overall, and how your eye or how your mind reacts to it. If you see the best 2D artist painting, like you see when they're painting, it's more about the gesture and understanding where you should put your attention. It's very tricky to do that in 3D because once you're sculpting something, it's kind of natural to just add details everywhere, because we can, and because the tools allow us to do that. So it's a very tricky balance to understand, and that's why even I mentioned on the last video, like even trying to study some of the work from the masters of just traditional sculpting, and then how they design their work and where they try to put the attention of your eye, and which areas to put details. And the same thing in the painting. If you start studying paintings from different artists, and start to understand where they try to focus their attention, and a little bit of detail in an area can sell the idea that there's detail everywhere. But I often see in 3D models just abusing of that technique and just putting details everywhere, and that definitely hurts your piece. So even on this stage, it's obviously trying to understand where I should put all those details, and even here it's probably getting a little too much and taking it away from the piece. But here you can see, another thing that I do is just use control. Like if you don't have subdivisions on your subtool, if you just control drag your mesh, you duplicate it. So that's a very easy way to duplicate your mesh and create details. So you can see here, it's some cool ornaments, but it was definitely too much. So I'm just getting rid of it for now and focusing on different areas. Again, just painting that eye again. I think I did, like I said, a lot of different eye shapes just to try to find something that looks cool. So you see me using clay tubes or clay buildup at this phase, and I'm trying to get a little more texture on when I'm sculpting the shapes. And clay tubes or clay buildup, it's super helpful to do that. You can see it adds a little bit more of those lines to the mesh, and that helps create a little bit more separation, or a little bit more just texture in general. So you see me going back and forth between clay standard and the clay buildup or clay tubes on this face, and trying to get that skin to feel tight at the same time of just adding a little bit more of shape. And you got to be careful here, and I mentioned that before, of just adding too much, or at this phase it's very easy to break the flow that you had on your sketch, and you can pretty much create a different vibe or a different character if you just start adding too much details, or if you start changing the way you approached it on the first place. So yeah, saving those revisions, or you can see even I zoom out, zoom in, zoom out, just to get an idea of how things are reading from far. Because of the tools, and because we can spend a lot of time just refining things, I used to tend to work on a very close close-up of a region, but getting it from far, rotating around, find a good camera angle, and really understanding more how everything is reading from far. I think it's very important. Trying to keep that flow of the curves like I mentioned before. If you start looking at this piece now, you'd see like on the nose, that nose flowing to the eye, kind of guiding your eye to the eye, and then from the eye it guides you to the side of the head, the temporal, and then that flows you into the horns. So it's really playing with those shapes and trying to guide your eye to a nice composition. I don't know what I was doing there. Maybe I was just testing my brushes. Here I'm just playing with the eyes again, trying to, I guess, give it a little more personality to the piece. And again, don't be afraid of changing stuff at any point. If you work in a production, that's what happens. Like if you do something and when you get feedback, you have to be able to change it on the fly and not be attached. And I think you have to force yourself to do the same thing on your personal projects, because that's when you learn from your mistakes, or that's when you learn how to be flexible with your stuff and understand how much you can push it and how much you can change it before you start breaking things apart and before you have to start over. It's very important just understand your tools and understand how much you can push it without losing work. And I really force it myself on my personal projects. And then there's another thing too, like when you I guess when you're doing something personal and maybe you don't have concept, or even when you do have concept, it's very hard to push yourself, or having an extra set of eyes on your projects is very important, because if you're looking at something for too long, you kind of lose track of what you're trying to accomplish or how to push yourself. So having a very clear goal of improving, if you're doing something personal, it's very important to take a step back, look at references, and look at what you can improve. Don't finish something just because you want to finish. Taking a step back and looking at what can be improved at every step of the work is very important, just so you don't get just so you don't get trapped into the mindset of just trying to finish something because you just want to move into something else, or you just want a quantity on your portfolio. And that goes back to the type of work that I choose to my personal projects, and where I'm at with professional career and all that. Before I start talking about that, you can see on the time lapse I'm just refining the work, and those sharp lines is what gives it that finished look, I guess, or the more refined. So going back and forth with this standard brush, adding some sharp lines, and then the clay to give it more of those secondary breakups into the mesh. You start seeing on the eyebrows, or the region that I'm working right now, trying to add those sharp lines is what makes it that much sharper. And that's a balance between even high polish. I don't know if I mentioned that, but I do use high polish to get those clean edges, or those like flat areas. That's a very useful tool. So from here, it's just spending the time, spending the time on each area. Again, looking at the piece overall, seeing how much you have to push it without breaking the original shape. So it's finding that balance, and the rest is just, I guess, sculpting knowledge and just shape and flow knowledge. There's a lot of good artists out there that do a really good job at this. Trying to get those curves to flow nicely, and again, just trying things. I think from the inspiration from this, the spikes, or the back of the head was really just helmets, medieval helmets, trying to get some of the metal feel and a little bit of the spikes. I'll do the same thing on the back later. And you can see me coming in with the clay brush and add that kind of a metal, like I guess heated metal texture to the sculpt. And the clay brush is really nice to just add that breakup, and you can see the specs start picking up those breakups, and it really helps. And then going back with some of the more sharp lines, like I mentioned before, and adding that extra touch of just sharpness. But let's talk about just the type of work, like I mentioned before. It's really important, I think, for me, or it doesn't matter where you are in your career, but just finding the pieces that's gonna give you what you need on or where you are. So for example, when I was starting and trying to get a job into this industry, it's very important for me, and it should be very important for you, of just trying to show your technical skills. It's more important when you're beginning to the studio to invest on you, but understanding that you have the technical skills to execute the job. Most of the times, if someone is art directing you when you're starting, if you have a good personality and you're open to critiques, if you do have the technical knowledge, you'll be able to get inside of a studio and deliver the job. There's a lot of steps through the way to make sure you're hitting the art quality, the art bar, like when you're a beginner. So picking up projects that's gonna show off some of your technical skills. Of course, invest the time to learn the technical skills to be a character artist, learning how to just do good topology, learning how to do good UVs, selecting projects that are smaller when you're beginning. It's very, I think it's better, because then you can deliver a better quality at the end of just, maybe you don't have enough experience of sculpting or designing something, like picking up a concept that's simpler, maybe something a little more stylized, so you can show off some of your technical skills. Again, doing good topology, good UVs, nice bake, good texturing, just the whole package, understanding what is needed to create a character for a production, and focusing your projects on that. When I was starting, I did 3 to 4 full projects that I showed off, topology, UVs, all the technical stuff. I think if you have like 2 good ones, it's probably a good a solid portfolio if you're trying to apply for a job. Later, when you when you have that on your portfolio, or you have just the professional experience, because that's another thing. Like if you do have professional experience, then that's kind of within the lines of, like, people already expect that you know all this stuff, and then you don't really have to focus that much on it. It's cool if you have some of that stuff on your portfolio, just because it's just an extra push of just showing off that you can deliver on that kind of stuff. But if you do have professional experience, then I'll probably, and that happened with me, like once I'll start working more for different studios and have a nice resume, then I was just focusing more of my work of just getting a concept art and just challenging myself. So it was more complex concept pieces, and then challenging my design skills or my interpretation skills, and trying to really create something that would give me on a highlight or a top roll somewhere, and really challenging my skills, trying to get something that I'm not comfortable with, like trying different styles. I mean, the style is a different conversation that we can have on the next video, but trying different things and trying to find myself with the things that I like, and then building my portfolio based on that. I spend a lot of time trying different things, but I kind of find myself more into this, realistic but a little bit more stylized style, and that's the stuff that I like to do. So even though I was pushing on my just designing or sketching pieces for myself, for portfolio, that was more for studying, but for portfolio I was really focusing on just interpreting concept art that was really inspired by, and And when you're a character guy, when you're a character artist and you want to work in a big studio, that's probably most of the stuff that you're gonna do. You know, a character artist usually would take concept art and just build it from scratch to final. You know, model, topology, bakes, UVs, textures, putting an engine, create shaders, all that stuff. So you know, understanding that and getting a concept and just taking it to final was the thing to focus on when I was trying to get a job at a game studio. And then by doing that, you probably get, you know, freelance opportunities, and then you can start building up your resume on that stuff. And you know, later, if you do have a passion for like designing things or concept, then I guess you can start focusing more on creating designs of your own, and that's kind of where I'm at right now. But if you really want to, you know, get a job or work as a character artist, I guess follow those steps. But if you you know, there's other areas, like if you do want to be a concept guy, a concept artist, but you know, you work on 3D, that's also fine. And I would just say you should just focus on that from early on. Don't worry too much about topology and all the stuff that I mentioned before. And this is more about just, you know, what I'm doing right here. Sculpting in ZBrush, playing with shapes, understanding more of the overall design flow, and then doing renders and, you know, go straight to Photoshop, paint it, create a final image and design. I think if you want to do that, you just have to be a lot more flexible in ZBrush, of just not getting attached to certain things and just trying things out and creating, you know, meshes fast. I think that's the thing. Different from when if you're sketching on paper or Photoshop, like you can create a lot of ideas or sketch out a lot of ideas really fast. You know, ZBrush is slow in a way of creating that, because it's hard to create a full composition or a full character the way it is in Photoshop and present different ideas. But it's a very powerful tool depending on what you're doing. Like if you're sketching a character or doing a mech or something, it's really powerful. So it really depends on what you want to do. And going back to the model here, like I mentioned before, that the teeth was more of a sketch of what I was trying to get, but it's really hard to get control and get a nice finish on a mesh like this without going crazy with the resolution, or, you know, doing masks and trying to pull things in, and that's probably gonna mess up my topology and all that stuff. So I'm doing a sketch or trying to refine it as much as I can, just the meshes that I have, but then I'll start extracting the teeth, so the final is way more refined. Again, not spending too much time is the key here, but at this point, it's really hard to find that balance. And just before I go into that, you can see I'm making a mask to the geometry that I have, and I'm using the extract tool and the subtool just to get a mesh out of it, and that's gonna get me really close to the sketch that I did, as you can see. And then from there, I'm just cleaning up and then z-remeshing, so I have a clean topology. And I'll do the same thing for just a couple of the teeth, and then I'll start duplicating them around. So what I was saying before is that it's really hard to find the balance of like how much time you should spend on something, and I'm guilty of that, of trying to police myself of like, you know, you've done enough, let's do something else. And when I say that, I mean like on a piece, like, you know, we've worked on the eye enough, let's do something else. Like just trying to jump around for like to like different areas, because it's very easy to get stuck into something and think you're on the right track, and then spend a lot of time refining it. But then when you look at the overall piece, you just realize that you're completely off. And then at that point, you probably commit to a lot of time to something, and then it just gets frustrating. Like you know, do I go back? You ask yourself, like, do I go back and and redo this again, or like, oh, you know, I spend that much time, maybe it's fine. And I've done that quite a lot in different projects, and that's why I try to police myself of not staying too long in a certain area, and then just keep touching everything a little bit and going back. For this, I found a really cool reference of because like some metal teeth on a skull, and I was really trying to recreate that feeling. So you can see even the shapes that I'm playing with is something very specific that I was following from the reference. And you know, when I found that metal thing, then that's when I'm going to start adding more of the mat caps into this mesh, just so I'm just trying to get closer to the final piece. So if you have the material option turned on that brush, like on the RGB, and you just fill your mesh, you can paint the mesh with the material. And that's the same thing I did with the eyes. I just forgot to mention how I did that, but it's pretty straightforward of just applying a material to an object, to a subtool, sorry. And usually the metals will give me a very different idea of how things are reading, so I try to get the metals in there and something that will give me more of a spec break. I'm doing the same thing for the bottom, from the bottom there, but I'm just reusing the subtools that I created for the upper teeth and bringing it down. You can see the middle, I had enough resolution there, so I'm just keeping it as it is. I'm not duplicating with the subtools. Things are starting to get very refined, or again, secondary shapes. As you can see, I haven't done any small details, small wrinkles, or any of that at this point. I try to get away from it as much as I can, because once you're at that point, it's very easy to get things muddy. Like if you go back and rework on a certain shape or start playing with the details, things get very muddy and get very dirty real quick. So I try to stay away from that and just leave that for the final. That's just final step. Like that, you shouldn't spend that much time adding details. I mean, once you start putting alphas and things like that, it's a very quick process. So I'll spend most of my time on the secondary shapes and just trying to get you know, things to look good without needing to add much detail. Here you can start see me doing damp standard, and like I said, I try to keep this towards the end of just adding small wrinkles, and even that I'm still going big with my details, so I can erase and really not get attached. You see me here just completely sculpting on top and trying to find that balance of like how much is too much. Here I'm just turning on and off the colors, because as you can see, the colors can change your perspective quite a lot. And when you're sculpting something, it's kind of easy to get lost on that. Just the color in your eye, you know, it's going to drive to a certain location. Maybe the colors that you put on early on, you know, they're not working 100%, and that's why turning on and off, especially at this phase of just refining the character, it's important. And you can see I'm going to start changing a little bit of the colors, you know, when I start turning it on and off, because you know, maybe I can do something different.